As the current monarch of the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and a bunch of other countries, King Charles III enjoys something known as sovereign immunity. In a nutshell, sovereign or crown immunity, as it's sometimes known, means that the king is, for all intents and purposes, above the law. So, does this mean that Charles could just up and kill somebody if he felt like it, all the while getting off scot free? Yes, actually, and not just in the UK. It turns out King Chucky can commit any crime just about anywhere in the world and get away with it legally thanks to the fact that he enjoys both sovereign immunity and diplomatic immunity. As we've discussed in previous videos, diplomatic immunity is so exceptionally far reaching in its scope that a person protected by it could indeed go all lethal weapon 2 on everyone with total impunity. The one problem for those diplomats, however, is that their home nations would in all likelihood not take kindly to them doing so, and beyond recalling them, they'd likely face prosecution at home for these acts if they were serious enough crimes. Going back to King Charles, however, unlike most with diplomatic immunity, he does not technically have to worry about what anyone in the UK thinks. You see, part of his immunity stems from the fact that all justice in the United Kingdom and various other countries he rules is meted out in his name. Now, obviously, Charles doesn't personally dispense justice like the kings and queens of yore, among other reasons, because doing so would be impractical. As a result of this, whilst King Charles is considered the fount of justice for his subjects, the ability to administer it is doled out to judges across Britain, all of whom are granted the post-nominal of KC, standing for King's Counsel, as a nod to their position as an extension of the king's will. Likewise, the Crown Court similarly dispenses justice in the king's name, and, as a result, all cases brought before it are tried as the Crown versus blank. Unsurprisingly from this, it is not technically possible for the king himself to be tried before the Crown Court, as it would involve him prosecuting himself. Looking more deeply, his sovereign immunity also makes it so that the king cannot be tried in civil proceedings either, meaning he cannot be sued or have other such civil proceedings brought against him. The king also cannot be forced to testify in open court or even be interviewed by the police, not that this matters seeing as he also can't be arrested. And even if he could be legally arrested for a crime, it wouldn't matter anyway. You see, technically no arrest can be made in the monarch's presence without his consent. Thus, arresting him is impossible on this count too, because it would most definitely have to happen in his presence. It's perhaps also worth mentioning that all prisoners in the United Kingdom are held at His Majesty's leisure, which is why the king can pardon criminals if he so wills it, meaning he could just walk out of prison anyway by telling everyone to let him go. And speaking of the police, as with the justice system, they too are charged with dispensing justice in the king's name, and all members of the British law enforcement, upon joining the force, must swear an oath that reads in part, "I will well and truly serve the king in the office of constable." Or to put it another way, the king is the absolute authority of the entire UK policing system, and his word is quite literally law. As a result, the king could theoretically shut down any attempt made to arrest him by simply telling the officer to go away. Now, you might say if he did all this, surely Parliament would step in and curtail the murderous king's powers to ensure he could be prosecuted. The problem is that all laws proposed by Parliament require what is known as royal assent before they can be enshrined into British law. As the name suggests, royal assent comes directly from the king himself, so a Parliament looking to prosecute the king would need the king to authorize the bill limiting his own powers, which he obviously would not do if he suddenly decided to start treating life like a game of Grand Theft Auto. It's also worth noting here that the king has the power to completely dissolve Parliament if he so chooses and cause a whole new set of people to be elected. And if this group displeased him, he is free to do it again and again and again. It's also the king's duty to appoint the prime minister, and he could, in theory, appoint anyone he wanted to the position, regardless of the way the British public voted in the elections. So installing someone who would do what he wanted would not be any real hurdle. Thus, it would take a literal revolution for Parliament to rewrite the laws concerning the king without his consent. There's a potential problem with this too, though. You see, the monarch is the commander-in-chief of the British Armed Forces. As former professional head of the British Armed Forces, Lord Charles Guthrie once noted of the king's predecessor, "The armed forces are loyal and we live in a democracy, but actually their ultimate authority is the Queen." Yes, like with the police, every member of the armed forces in Britain swears an oath of fealty to the king, and he is considered the ultimate authority in regards to military matters. Thus, if there was an attempt at parliamentary revolution and members of the parliament refused to step down as they were rewriting British law without the king's consent, he could simply order the British armed forces to forcibly remove them from power or even line them all up and have them executed. If the king felt particularly gung-ho, he could even personally declare war on any nation or person, and thanks to his royal prerogative, need not consult anyone about it beforehand. In fact, he could even authorize a nuclear strike on a person anywhere in the world via Britain's secretive and expansive network of nuclear submarines, again thanks to the fact that all the men and women stationed aboard these vessels swear to do the king's orders. Now, you might say a foreign power might get pretty upset if that nuclear strike happened on their soil, and the international criminal courts might also try to step in. But the king could theoretically make his army larger by legally commandeering any ships that enter British waters, another power of his, and by commanding the various armies of the Commonwealth, all of whom swear a similar oath of fealty to the crown, same as the British Armed Forces, to come to his aid. That's a lot of nations and military might. Now, how many of these armies, police, etc. would actually listen, particularly after he decided to go all Armageddon on the world, is irrelevant to the legal discussion at hand. What matters is that the king technically has the ability to do all of this and that nobody could legally stop him without his permission.